All right, MYB, thank you for coming right back here for episode number 212 of the Minding Your Business podcast, entrepreneurship, real estate, trending news. There's still no business like minding your own. We're recording this Friday, October the 23rd, and we're just progressing right along. We're almost a month into the fourth quarter of 2020. And so we're getting to the final days before the presidential election. Some of you may have watched the presidential debate on last night, which was the second debate between the incumbent president and the challenger. And so hopefully you enjoyed that once again. But regardless of that, we hope that this podcast is reaching you in good spirits and in good health. Obviously, with everything going on, we definitely wish that for you. Subscribe to the podcast, 5-star, wherever you get your pods. Helps us continue to expand the MYB community. Listen, I am extremely excited about today's guest. We want to get in with no delay. Dr. Katrina Burrus joins us. She is a PhD. She is a guru in human and organizational development, a keynote speaker, and she's published the book Managing Brilliant Jerks, which I love, as well as global leadership. Extremely accomplished, international success. Dr. Burrus has over 18 years experience as a first master certified coach. And she's the founding board member of the ICF, which is the International Coaching Federation in Switzerland. What a mouthful. But Dr. Katrina, thank you so much for taking time to be on the podcast. It's tremendous to have you.
Well, Champ, I'm delighted to be here. I really am. I think you're awesome.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And for those that are watching here on YouTube, I love your background. Looks very modern, that sort of thing. It's kind of making me think, God, I need to call my contractor.
Well, I painted it all white and said, let's make it sort of Miami Vice type.
Right. No, but definitely love it. So, Dr. Katrina, let's get right in. For those that are listening that aren't familiar with you, tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of your pathway journey to get to where you are today.
So I grew up in a very international environment. I grew up in Switzerland, and my mother and father remarried Europeans that were from different parts of Europe, and I grew up in a very international environment. And so today I use that knowledge to work with the UN, work with Novartis, work with the CERN, which is the biggest fundamental research center in Europe.
Okay.
And I've used that to help people to go from one corporate environment, cultural environment, to another and succeed a new assignment.
Yeah.
And then the other expertise I have is I had a pretty toxic stepfather in some ways, and I realized later that his ways that hurt me, but his intention was good. And so I developed a process to help what I call brilliant jerks to transform into inspiring leaders. So using these personal experiences to make it a professional experience.
Yeah, excellent. I love that term, brilliant jerk. I'm intrigued, even just reading your background and looking at some of with your book publication, Dr. Katrina. Tell us, what is a brilliant jerk?
So a brilliant jerk, let's say, will make a difference between a brilliant jerk and a demanding leader with high standards. Okay, so The brilliant jerk is usually triggered. They're brilliant. Now I add the word brilliant because maybe they have a fabulous expertise, and the hospital wants that cardiologist to come in and work to get them in. And then they find out he has a terrible bedside manner. Or there's somebody that comes into the corporation to turn around the company, but he did a great job, got revenues up, but everyone wants to leave and there's a high turnover. Okay, right. So that's a little bit the descriptive. Next is, of course, they have a lot of cost. But let's say a brilliant jerk is triggered by something and he attacks a little bit. Sometimes a lot. Okay, so somebody would come to him, they didn't succeed their mission. And the brilliant jerk will attack in a very personal way.
Mm.
Okay. And the brilliant jerk feels threatened because they didn't succeed, because that reflects on them.
Ah.
Because they have this huge pressure to perform.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the demanding leader with high standards, the same situation. The person comes to them, hasn't succeeded, but the demanding boss will take a step back, manage his emotions, self-manage, and analyze, is this person not able to do it? And therefore you have to reduce the project so that they can. Or should they need a mentor to
Mm-hmm.
help them on the way? Or they should cut the project. But he will act according to that person in that situation. And if the person that didn't succeed was because they didn't want to, then he'll change his leadership agility and say he will have a heart-to-heart discussion. But basically, the difference is that the demanding leader wants the other to succeed and will adapt his behavior according to what is best for that person to succeed.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, Dr. Katrina, what is the impact on the organization from having, say, a brilliant jerk at the head? So if you've got, what I'm assuming it's gender inclusive, so male or female, if you've got a brilliant jerk, say in your C-suite, right? Yeah. What is the typical impact on the organization, just overall, maybe from a cost standpoint? What's that impact of a brilliant jerk?
So a brilliant jerk on the organizational level has a cost because there's higher turnover. Research, the Gallup study shows that people choose a company for the company, but leave because of a bad boss.
Yes.
Right? And then 74% of successful leaders said they've had one intolerable boss. And that means 74% of you, ladies and gentlemen, will have a difficult boss. So that's the breadth of the problem. But the cost to the organization is excess turnover because they don't want to stay around, absenteeism, health issues. Maybe the person doesn't want to go to work or has anxiety problems or depression problems, and that causes less people to come to work. And presenteeism, which is the person is present in their office, but what they're processing is the hurt they felt from the boss.
Yes.
They're not really productive. The other thing that is often overlooked is that people react according to the mood of the brilliant jerk rather than what's best for the company. So all these costs on a team level, less creativity. Why should I give my opinion if he's going to take it for his? Yes. Why should I give my opinion if he's going to criticize me in front of everybody and humiliate me? You see, they're brilliant too. So sometimes they process information so quickly, and they think because people don't process information as quickly as them, that they're stupid or incompetent. Right. So this negative filter towards the other. And on the individual level, of course, is people that are less productive because of all the issues I've mentioned, health issues.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. And I'm thinking as you were saying that, I'm nodding my head because, I think I mentioned to you kind of offline, Dr. Katrina, that my background's in banking, right? And so I came up through the ranks from management trainee all the way up to my last role at a financial institution was in the C-suite. Wow. and so if you go back, I was running a retail operation. And so I can go back and think through who the brilliant jerks were, so to speak, within the organization. And again, early on in my career, he actually was a mentor of mine. A lot of it for what not to do as opposed to what to do. He had a great drive. He drove great performance. However, his methods for driving that performance were not the best and resulted in that kind of turnover. He was very abrasive, kind of more of an "I got you" type of guy, as a leader and as a boss, however you want to look at that, or as a manager. And so he drove by incorporating or engaging that fear, Dr. Katrina,
Yes, right, absolutely.
he would drive the performance. Yeah. Yeah, he would drive the performance, but the problem is that he had very high turnover at the bank that eventually caught up with him. There was a time where his performance could overshadow the turnover in his division, right?
Yeah,
But as the environment changed, right, as things began to evolve within the organization and the environment changed, what happened was then his performance couldn't overshadow anymore the fact that he had a high percentage of turnover, because then the company starts analyzing at a closer kind of point the impact of things like that, the turnover, the sick leave, all those things come in, and they look at his division and say, hey, you're at the top of the list, and turnover and all these different things, and this is costing us a crap load of money. And
yeah,
so that began to to really impact him in his career, and he had to evolve from that.
yes. So you make a very important point. You see that all of a sudden the company realizes that there's these costs, non-tangible costs in the beginning, interpersonal. And they usually call me, my clients call me about that time where they're on the rift. Shall I keep this person because he does incredible results or very good with his clients? Or should I let him go because he's starting to cost us money with the turnover?
Yes.
And so when I go into a company, I evaluate how much time they'll give me for that brilliant jerk to transform before they make any drastic decisions.
Yeah.
Because if they let him go, they go to another company and start the same way again. Or if they put them in a different department, they're not really leveraging his brilliance.
Right.
But that's usually when the companies call me to
Yeah.
work with their brilliant jerk.
Yep, absolutely. And so when they call you, Dr. Katrina, are you working directly with the individuals that they've identified that have those issues, or are you working more kind of at a high level, cultural wise, or at what level within the organization, depending on the size of it, of course? What
So
level do you come in?
that's a great question, Chan, because one, I look at the organization before I start with individual one-to-one coaching.
Mhm.
And I look at what is rewarded in the organization. Is these kind of leadership misbehaviors rewarded? Not directly, but if this person did fabulous results, they've promoted him very quickly through the hierarchy. And so
Yeah.
other people look and say, oh, well, if he's succeeded and behaves that way, maybe that's the way to do it.
Yes.
And also, if that's the case, and I work on one-to-one with the individual through my 7-step process, and
Hmm.
the person changes and they go back to an environment that's pretty toxic, it's like taking a recovering alcoholic back to the bar with his drinking buddies, right?
Right. Right.
Well,
Right.
so you have to look at the organization and see what they have in place that encourages good behavior. And if your listeners are interested, they can go on my website. I have the 7 mistakes CEOs make about that on my website that's called excellentexecutivecoaching.com.
Yeah. Excellent.
Then I work with individual one-on-one. Usually they're not aware of what triggers them into these aggressive behaviors.
Hmm.
So I work on one-to-one and how to self-manage, self-aware, and then self-manage. What is the behind the triggers? What makes them lose control? Also, how they think, how they make decisions. Uh,
Hmm.
what's their brilliance too? What's their brilliance that make them think that others are stupid or incompetent?
Yeah.
And then after that, I have them work with their boss because the boss has usually a direct relationship on their progression in their career.
Hmm.
So now they've learned a lot about themselves. Next, they need to learn how they similar and different to their boss and help the communication. Sometimes the boss needs some coaching before this, because if he's really toxic, he's a little bit scared about having this conversation. Then after that, we look at teams. How does this brilliant jerk behave in teams? And I collect data. And then how does this leader behave in the bigger environment? And for that, I do a lot of qualitative research, inductive research. So I look and interview the boss, the top management, the peers, and the direct reports of the employees, and get all this data anonymously and give it back to the brilliant jerk. So usually they have a strong drive to perform. And so when you show data, a lot of data, irrefutable data, that they are incompetent in a certain area, but very competent in another, since they like challenges, they start. But it's also a shock for them too, because a lot of them don't realize.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. And Dr. Katrina, I love when you said that, because as I was thinking through that and thinking through my own experience, right? Oftentimes with executive leaders, so let's kind of take that level of leadership. At least in my experience, they tend to believe that they've risen above coaching and development.
Yes.
And sometimes, that can vary. Of course, that's a wide generalization. It can vary from organization to organization. But in general, they tend to think that they've risen above reproach, right? They're above coaching and development. That's only for the levels below them. And so then, because they're not as open to that coaching and development for themselves, that doesn't cascade down to the rest of the organization, right? So they become very poor examples, even though they're kind of the shining light example because they're at the top of the organization. And so do you run into that in your experience with, even if they do hire you? Because I think the differentiating point of that is the fact that you provide this fact data for them. So you quantify, even things that are more qualitative to them, or like you say, they may not even realize it, but you're providing this fact data to support the impact of whatever their behavior is on the organization. So do you find them to be receptive to that and receptive to your coaching and, kind of your insight that you provide them?
Well, you made a good point. They work so hard on getting results, so hard, and usually they do.
Right.
They feel a bit betrayed that now they're coming to say, hey, you haven't done it in the way we want. So that's understandable in that way. But I'm there to help them succeed.
Right.
And I bring them data where there are potential seeds of derailment in their career. And also, what are their strengths, what they can leverage? So it's not just the negative, it's also how can they leverage their good points.
Sure.
And then, which is very important, is that some of them get this negative feedback for 360 degrees, which is a questionnaire on competencies with a scale, Likert scale, from 1 to 5.
Yeah.
And they get this for 3 years. It's, again, feedback from their boss, their peers, and their employees. They get this feedback that they're not good with their employees, for example. And I've had clients have it for 5 years straight, but they don't change. So what is very important, Champ, is that not only they get all this data, which really is frustrating because they're high performers usually, it's then take them together and continually create insights so that they can change the behavior, which could be derailing their careers.
Yes.
And it's not enough to get all the data. It's then what are the new behaviors that they need to do? And the data is so precise, Champ, that, for example, I like this example. One person, which was a woman, was brilliant. Believe me, she was so brilliant. And she was working first in Eastern Europe and did extremely well, which they're pretty direct, the Eastern Europe. Then she went to Asia. Well, saving face, I'm generalizing Harbu, but there's much more genteel in their ways. And they said she doesn't communicate well. So I said, what does that mean? Well, she just doesn't say things nicely. So what does that mean concretely? Well, she walks 3 steps in front of me, and every time I ask her a question, she looks and rolls her eyes and sighs, exasperated. So was she aware of that? No. It's even her nonverbals that were perceived as aggressive. She was brilliant and, of course, had so much experience that a question from that person seemed so stupid to her, okay, that she got aggravated. But once she knows what exactly she does that is not well perceived, then she can change. And then we work on that together.
Yeah. Excellent. And so, for working for someone like that, right? Let's take it from the employee standpoint, Dr. Katrina. How should, for those that are listening that are maybe chuckling and say, you know what, I work for that guy or that woman right now. What would you recommend for employees and organizations that are working for, again, quote unquote, that brilliant jerk, right? Who he or she may or may not, one, they haven't had the chance to get interaction with you, and they haven't had a chance to maybe learn maybe some of the follies of their ways, and they're very difficult to work with. But then those individuals, those employees, also want to be able to elevate their career, and so there's always this balance in corporate world life where people are trying to balance being authentic and true to themselves with the pathway of the corporate world, which is, tends to be very conservative, and you want to make sure that you're keeping the proper alignment and proper relationships to have opportunities for promotion and things like that. So what would you recommend for those people listening that are working for those type of organizations that have those type of leaders in place?
For one, you have to realize that they have huge amount of pressure on themselves to perform.
Yeah.
If they don't perform, I'm going to be extremist, they don't exist. So they're triggered very quickly. I would say, look at them in some ways, they see people as predators or prey, right? Like when you feel threatened and they feel threatened by losing face, not succeeding. So that's when they feel threatened in the corporate world.
Yeah.
So when they are there, they will, if they see you as prey, they might attack you. If they see you as a predator, they might be submissive. So sometimes it's very confusing because they see their employees as prey and sort of continually attack their self-confidence, but submissive to their boss. It can happen, So it's very confusing. So first be aware that they're triggered very easily. Find out what triggers them. When do they get obnoxious? And also stay extremely neutral, because it requires for you to be even more self-controlled. And it's their problem, not yours.
Right.
Yeah. But it's very hard to navigate in an environment where you have a brilliant jerk, because they want all the recognition. They're often they're thirsty for recognition, and this way they're prompted sometimes to take the recognition of others. We can all be tempted by it, but and then they're probably extremely stressed. We're all stressed, and we all can misbehave sometimes, but that's a common behavior of theirs. For someone that is a victim, and I'll give you an example. One client of mine called me, who's an executive committee of this multinational, so not a beginning leader. Called him up and he says, "Look, I don't know what's happening to me. I can't speak straight. I fumble when I talk, and I'm usually a very good speaker. I'm getting rashes on my skin, and people think that I'm not coherent." So it can get to that. At that point, you got to seek help. If it gets to that, to destroy your physical being, seek help or move out of it if you can't change the brilliant jerk. Some people say to me, "Well, why don't you should I talk to HR?" That can be dangerous. if HR goes and talks to the boss and thinks they're doing well by saying, look, people are complaining, so-and-so complained, but you didn't treat them right. Well, a brilliant jerk, if he feels threatened in his competence,
Right.
will attack.
Sure.
So that's dangerous. So, but if you can present it in different ways, one way to present it is says, look, I'm doing the best I can and I can get these results. However, if I get this kind of leadership, it's not effective as much in getting the results. So I want you to be aware of this. Well, if there's enough people that go to HR and say the same thing, usually goes to upper management.
Right. Yep. Absolutely.
Or they offer them coaching, and that's usually when I come in.
Yeah.
It becomes a problem, and there's excess turnover.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things, Dr. Katrina, that I learned, fairly early in my career and then kind of throughout my career was managing my manager, right? So the same gentleman that I mentioned earlier, one of the things that I learned, like you say, what triggered him is he looks for, like you say, there's the pressure to perform, right? And want to have excellence. So when there's a gap area, what he wanted to know was, one, were you aware of it? So, and I'm talking about being an entry level management. So think of like a branch manager at a bank branch, right? So he wants to know, are you aware of the gaps, right? Can you quantify that? And can you attach the quantification, so to speak, to the behaviors, right? What are the behaviors? And then, of course, important, what are you going to change and adjust to adjust the results, right? So I can remember being at a branch that did very well in a lot of categories, except for maybe like one. There's this one category that in sales that would be tough, maybe getting like fee income, right? Some of it or a lot of it had to do with the location of the branch and things like that. But I knew that he was going to come from my head with that. I would be great and everything else, but he's going to come after me for fee income. So most of my contemporaries, my peers, would, like you said, he's looking to, I kind of refer to him as a shark in the water, right? So he's looking to see who's bleeding in the water. And then he's going to be Jaws, right? From the movie Jaws, where the shark comes swimming up and like say he sensed who's wounded in the water, and that's who he was going to pounce on. So instead of being, that wounded whatever in the water, I already would send it ahead of him coming to meet with me, Dr. Katrina. I would send him my summary, right? Here's where we are with everything. In this category of fee income, here's where our gap is. And it's not giving him the excuses. It's giving him the fact data around it, and then tying that fact data to the behavior. Because of, this number is a result of, maybe, we're not making enough calls. So, maybe our goal is to make 10 calls a day. We're going to up that to 20. Right. And so, we're quantifying everything around a behavior. So what happened was I found this out early, and you can share with me your thoughts on this. I'd love to hear it. Is I started managing him to the sense that when he came to see me, he was responding to the information I had given him versus the information he pulled on me to bring the talk to me.
Yes.
Right. So I owned my desk in that sort of sense. And that made my relationship with him a little different, because it wasn't that I wasn't faced with the same level of accountability, but Dr. Katrina, what it was is he was replying to what I had sent him, right? And so I had already addressed the things that he was going to come try to attack me on. I had already addressed and gave him the plan. So now he's coming to talk about my plan. Hey, Ron, I like your plan with that. What do you see with this? And he's either becoming an owner with me, kind of like a partner, and saying, oh, in addition to that, I'll do this from my end, right? It's because I've laid out a plan for him that makes sense, that doesn't suck, right? And it's a plan that's based on fact data that he was going to come and attack me with. If I had not done that, I would have been another fish in the water bleeding, and he'd come attack me on that one point, and try to beat me down with it.
So what you did also is by not hiding the situation, but diminishing his anxiety that something's wrong.
Right.
By having, as you said, a plan.
Yes.
I'm thinking of this and that. So you're being strategic in your conversation with him. We have this, and this issue is an issue of a potential problem, but we are thinking of addressing it this way to resolve the problem. See how his anxiety would go down.
Yes.
It's the blood that attracts the shark is anxiety and fearing that things are not under control for the brilliant jerk.
Right.
So by preparing, informing, but preparing and having a strategic, what I call a strategic conversation is, look, I'm thinking of this. I want to do this to address the issue. So basically you're having him focus on that conversation, and maybe even going a step further and asking him, what do you think of my plan? And do you have other ideas how we can address the situation? Yeah. So you're directing his brain into problem solving for your issue.
Yeah, exactly. And so I would share that with people. And even as I rose up the ranks, Dr. Katrina, and, when I get to the C-suite where, now I've got, a division and I've got multiple branches in a region and that sort of thing. I learned from those experiences. And so, in his case, I learned, kind of I learned some of what to do, but I learned a lot of what not to do and who I didn't want to be. Right. Yeah. And one of the things I think that helped me, or at least I think prevented me from being, that brilliant jerk, whether it was then or now, is I came up through the ranks in the industry. And so because of that, I had a different sense of, for example, some folks, in banking would come in right from MBA school, right, where they've never worked at the entry level. They walk almost right into the C-suite. And so sometimes their perception of entry level workers and, things like that, like I say, it's just so much pressure to perform at the high level of the organization. And they've never really been in the weeds of the process. Right. Exactly. But what you find certainly in this environment now is those details, we've always said that, the term, the devil's in the details. Well, now those details are rising up to that higher level now in organizations, because you have to be a little bit more nimble and have the ability to adapt and pivot a little bit better. To do that, you have to have a better knowledge of what your processes are. Yeah. And so I had great knowledge of the process. So here's the thing, at different positions, because I had been in that position, I couldn't be BS'd, but then also I could have empathy on the impact of it day to day. And so that triggered into my more visionary piece of, here's what a process would look like, because I'm keeping the people in mind who have to do the job every day. It's not just about how great the vendor is or how great a price it is or how shiny things are. It's about the people.
You're not a
it's about the people, Dr. Katrina, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so wonderful. That's I agree with you. When you just come into a high-end position in a company, sometimes you underestimate the work of the people that haven't directly gone. I started in my career also working right in entry level. Mm-hmm. I didn't finish my degree because I was too excited to travel to different countries and speak different languages. So I went in the entry, and I think it's a very good experience to have.
Right.
And then later on I finished my MBA and my PhD.
Yeah. Yep, no doubt about it. And so, again, it's a great dialogue, just because, so many people are impacted, obviously, by organizational development and the organizational culture within companies, which leads me to, obviously today's times, right, Dr. Katrina, which is the worldwide pandemic, right, that we've been dealing with, at least in the United States, since late February into March. Where you are, what's been the impact, of the pandemic, and what are you seeing with organizations that you're working with? Has there been any change or impact or evolution in the thinking of the people that you're working with that's been brought on, from the advent of the pandemic?
Absolutely. What comes immediately to mind, better communication is key. because
Mhm.
you don't have the face-to-face, you don't have that immediate visual perception of how the other person is really taking in the information. Plus, sometimes there's less information. So I
Mhm.
think it takes more systems. When are we going to talk? What are we going to do? How we're going to connect virtually? So that has really been one of the major issues. And then, all of a sudden people work at home and there's the dog and the children and the wife.
Mhm.
Uh, so it takes a huge amount of concentration and focus and discipline, which
Yeah.
people didn't have to have because they went to the office and everyone around is doing the same thing. It's like when you go to the gym,
Right.
everyone is doing the gym and working out, you're inspired to do the same. But if you're at home and distracted, and usually that's in your brain, relaxed time, that's family time, it's even
Right.
more. So leaders really have had to think out what kind of leadership do they need to motivate their employees to still keep the connection, to still have them aligned to the overall mission. And
Yes.
now a lot of clients of mine are also in Switzerland. So Switzerland was very strict. Then now they went back to work. And then when they get used to working at home, uh, they're not really so anxious to come back to work. So that was something that had to be taken into account and motivate people to get back. And then again, now the COVID in Switzerland is increasing, just to give you an example. So they have
Mhm.
to close up things as well. So I really think that we really have to pivot, think of different ways of coaching, for example, in my profession, because virtuality is not really going to go away for some time, and then not enough time to change our ways. And so the leadership, virtual leadership, is going to be, I think, something that will be even more important. And virtual leadership, you need very good coaching and very good systems to keep people aligned.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that last sentence, how you wrap that up, Dr. Katrina. You have to have the proper systems and things like that in proper alignment between obviously your technology, your human capital, your community. All those things have to kind of be in line to have great success. And so what do you see kind of down the line? Of course, none of us have the crystal ball to see how the pandemic's going to pan out. Eventually it'll subside and that sort of thing. But are there any trends that you're seeing right now in the way that leaders are thinking that you think will continue and maybe evolve as the pandemic subsides and whatever that reality is, kind of, not to say post-pandemic, but again, as it subsides and life continues to move forward, are you seeing some maybe lasting trends starting to develop?
Well, one of the systems, we connect in the morning, a
Yeah.
regular hour. What are we going to do during the day? What do you want to achieve? What it could be for the day if it's direct, employee director, or what are we going to do the next week, the next month, the next year. So a lot of communication.
Yeah.
And if it's a direct leadership at night, what has been accomplished? What are the challenges? How can I help you do this? What
Hmm.
ideas do you have to improve? And
Yes.
so these systems need to be more in place of ways to keep the communication and keep the leadership and keep people aligned to what's the best for them and for the company.
Yeah.
So it's one thing. And then the other is, how do you motivate people virtually? Can you
Mm.
expect as much from someone that's working at home? Uh, are you giving them all the technology they need to work efficiently? Uh,
Yes.
how some people have risen because they're introverts, or they they've really done better than expected in this kind of environment, and
Sure.
others have done worse. So some
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, so it depends your personality. When I first started to work in my home, because I had two small children,
Yes.
it took me a good few months to be so focused and only on my work and not be distracted.
Yeah.
So much so that I have no sense of time today. When I'm focused, I don't know what time it is. So you develop the skill to be very focused in a world that maybe is not as controlled, your exterior environment.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that whole remote work. I think we could almost do an entire episode on it, just speaking about the impact of organizational development. I think we should have a part two of this at some point, Dr. Katrina, and we can jump into that much more because I'd love to hear your thoughts. Even at a deeper level as to organizational development around leading people who are now remote. Because,
Yeah.
like you said, many of the tech firms, many of the marketing firms. Some of those, particularly the newer ones, have done tremendously well because that was part of their culture even pre-pandemic, right? And I think some organizations that were again able to adapt and quickly pivot were able to do so very well as the onset of the pandemic came, and now that reality became working from home and having an appreciation and still being able to connect with people, even like you say, while they're virtual and maybe a little more distracted. I'm like you. I've got, I'm not sure how young your children are. My daughters are in elementary school. So all three of them, I've got three daughters,
Oh, wow.
my
A
wife
lot
and I.
in your life.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. And then of course I got two dogs here. So I've got two puppy cocker spaniels running around somewhere, or they may be asleep. Matter of fact, one's sitting here by me is asleep. So hopefully he doesn't start snoring. But then I've got scattered through the house. I've got a fifth grader, a fourth grader, and a second grader.
Oh, wow. That is,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. And so that's different because normally I'd be in my office, kind of working, and I've
Yeah.
had to bring some of my resources here home. And, part of our big thing now is trying to make sure our internet works well because it's four of us at all times during the day using Zoom or using different things streaming wise. And so that's become the reality for many, many people.
And a lot of the leaders that I coach, they were scrambling to get all the technology for their different employees, and you couldn't even, since many of them were doing the same thing as the
Hmm.
others, you couldn't even find the computers at one point.
Yeah.
So being very proactive, probably even if you have an inkling that something's going to happen, to do it quickly, because otherwise you might be in a situation where there's no computers.
Right.
That happened to one of my clients.
Yeah.
Well, he just got it in time, but
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And the big thing with that too is you talked about kind of that standard, Dr. Katrina, which I think is a powerful point in this, is that when you're in the office, it's the same for my daughters at school.
yeah,
If there's 1,500 kids at my daughter's school, they all have one standard when they're in the school building, right? They
yes,
all go, when the bell rings, everybody moves,
yeah,
right?
right,
Everybody goes to their different classrooms and whatnot. They have lunch if lunch is at 11 o'clock, they all go to lunch, right? Now, with everybody being at home, those 1,500 kids who had one standard go home to 1,500 or more standards, right? And so now it's the standard is from household to household. So even kids that live in households on the same street as each other, depending on the parents and what the social economics is, what the environment is, that sort of thing. Um, the standard varies from house to house. Even two houses next door can have complete different standards of the availability of internet, the availability of technology, the understanding how to troubleshoot that technology. One of the big things I have, Dr. Katrina, is when my daughters come to me and say, hey, I've been kicked out of my Zoom because the Wi-Fi, right?
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
I've got to be able to hopefully understand how to troubleshoot that some kind of way quickly enough to get them back in so
right.
they're not missing a lot of time out of school.
Mhm.
Same for me working when I'm doing presentations and things like that. I have to have that understanding. So, it's things like technology, it's the knowledge to be able to help them with assignments and things like that. And
Right.
those standards are different.
And sometimes it's good to have routines. Like
Yeah.
the bell rings and you have lunch, and to do it at home where there's a bell, maybe a different one, but there's a
Yeah.
bell, lunchtime. And now there's okay, now it's time to work. So from A to X, you do this. And then
Right.
lunch, because children like routine, because it gives
Hmm.
them a certain sense of stability, which is what they have at school. So to do that to some degree at home, so they have a rhythm,
Right.
less effort. They don't have to think about it from here to here. They go to Zoom and do their classes.
Right. Yep. And so what's funny is with kids, and this is probably happening with parents too, of course, in light of the I guess the gentleman, the journalist that was caught doing something unsavory on Zoom the other day. So short of short of that, for kids, I mean, I've gotten emails about teachers fussing about kids with blankets on their heads, kids that are playing with dogs while they're supposed to be in class,
Yeah.
stories of kids being falling asleep during class because they're sitting at home and
Yeah.
maybe they're not at the desk. Now they're sitting in the bed, or laying across the bed, going to school. Kids that are traveling that are in the back of, in cars, traveling to the, vacation or something like that, or, or whatever that, and they're joining via Wi-Fi on the road. So again, there's all these different standards, right? That, take away from that. And so bringing that home for the employee and for organizations are finding that out. Small ones, I think, can manage it a little bit better, but larger organizations that now are having,
Right.
dozens of people working from home and, with leaders who are accustomed to being able to micromanage and go by someone's office or, get a quick report and find out what Ron's doing or what, Dr. Katrina's doing. Now you've got to be able to trust and have confidence in your people that when they're at home, that they're not sitting there watching, ESPN all day and not working.
And you make a very important point, is that a lot of these leaders, the trust issue is something they have to handle. And
Right.
maybe at times be more understanding that they won't be quite as productive.
Right.
The time that they get used to in this new environment, it's not the same rules as before. But
Yeah.
the trust issue is a very thing. Are they really working? When I
Yeah.
call, I can't get hold of them. How?
Right.
What are they
Yeah. If he
doing?
doesn't answer the phone,
Because,
are they asleep? Are they at the mall? Are they, down on the beach somewhere? Where the hell are they?
exactly. That causes quite a bit of anxieties in the leaders.
Yes. Yep.
Mhm.
And especially if production is down or performance is down,
Right.
for that they're responsible for, like you said, that pressure, to perform. So, definitely tremendous dialogue. Dr. Katrina, let's talk about your publications a little bit. So managing brilliant jerks. Obviously, we've talked about that some here today, but talk about, your kind of your publication with that, your book, and what we can expect with that.
Yes. So this book, it's a Managing Brilliant Jerk, is a sort of a story about. So it's very easy reading,
Hmm.
and every chapter has questions, and those questions can be answered by reading the chapter. So you learn a lot about coaching and about brilliant jerks. So now my next book, it's a workbook, is
Yeah.
how you go through my 7-step process that
Yeah.
transforming a brilliant jerk into an inspirational leader. So that's what I'm doing, a workbook to help people go through this process of transformation. And my next book will be on next year will be how to help a leader succeed in a new assignment. You know
Yeah.
that 40% of leaders fail after 18 months in
Wow.
a new assignment. 40%. So I've helped leaders go from one corporate culture to another, and
Hmm.
or from one country to another,
Yeah.
different corporate environment. So I'm putting that all together with all the tools, visioning beforehand, cultural issues, and to succeed. So that would be the next podcast.
Yep, absolutely. So yeah, the next time when you come back, Dr. Katrina, we'll talk about this next book, and we're going to get into the organizational development around remote work. That's going to be tremendous, right? We
Okay.
need to get them all the major networks to
Yes,
show them that
that's great.
podcast.
But
Yeah.
what you can do now is go download that article, the 7 mistakes CEOs do, uh,
Yes.
and and what they need to do organizationally to stop abrasive behavior. And also, I'm going to upload how to develop your emotional intelligence, which is a
Mm,
fun tool. You draw a man, and for the head, you say, what is my employee visualizing? What is my employee wanting? And then
yes.
you go to the heart and you say, what is my employee passionate about? What do they really like to do in their work? And
Yeah.
what in their hands, you say, what are they actually doing in their work? And
Yes.
then you go to the gut and you say, what is that employee fearing? Where's their fears and their apprehensions? And
Yes.
then go to the legs and where do they want to go to? What's their next step? What's their developmental issues? And so that will help basically better know your employees, develop emotional intelligence, knowing your employees so well that you begin to adapt your leadership according to that person
Yes. Yep.
instead of
Exactly.
reacting always the same way to everybody.
Yep.
It's yeah. So I'll have that on my website, I think tomorrow. So
Okay, perfect. So everyone that's listening to this particular episode of the podcast, you'll be able to go to excellentexecutivecoaching.com. That's excellentexecutivecoaching.com. That link is in the show notes. And so you'll be able to click right to the link and get the free tools that Dr. Katrina is providing right here for you, MYB community. And so that's just tremendous. And I always encourage you all to utilize these great tools. These are tools that you normally may not have even known existed, that now that you do. So now that you know, it's kind of like Dr. Katrina said earlier, it's one thing to have the data. There's another thing to get it and apply it to behavior. And so, yeah, your next step is to go download that ASAP. So as soon as you get done to this episode, don't delay. Go ahead and go to excellentexecutivecoaching.com and go ahead and get that tool. And then shoot me an email. I may do a little contest with it. Shoot me an email at ron@themybpodcast.com. Let me know that you made that download. I may have something special for you. You just never know. You
oh,
never know with me. So you may have something special for downloading the free tool from our guest today, Dr. Katrina Burrus. So Dr. Katrina, as we kind of wrap up, I'd love to hear some of your best practices for success. Obviously, you've been extremely successful. You're able to relay that success and that mindset to leaders organizationally, or even those that have launched their own business. But what are just one or two best practices that have worked for you, personally and professionally, that you think will help those that are listening? Because here's the thing: those that are listening, come from all different walks of life, right? People, and they're enduring different things depending on how decisions and choices have impacted them, how the environment, different things. But yeah, I think having a good word from you, one or two things that have worked for you that people can take from this when they get done listening, right? And go back to life. Some things they could say, I love what Dr. Katrina said about this. I think that's the missing piece for me. So, what are those one or two things from you?
okay. So in the morning, I have a book and I write what I'm grateful for.
Mm,
So it's like it could be my child that came and talked to me, could be whatever. And then I write, what is the focus for the next 90 days?
yes.
And then I say, today, what are the 3 most important things do I need to accomplish today?
Mm,
And then I write other things that I need, maybe, but the 3 most important is something I got to do today. And then there's
okay.
others. And then then I think any thoughts or any ideas I have. So that's in the morning. And
Yeah.
at night, I look over the day and I say, I look at what really was successful,
Yes.
what were my challenges, any ideas I have how to overcome them,
Mm-hmm.
and again, any thoughts, ideas I have. So it's a process in the morning and in the evening. And it's helped me a lot to stay focused, to be grateful for things that happen, just wonderful moments in the day.
Yeah.
And it also helps me if I've struggled with something to brainstorm what I can do to overcome it and who I may call upon to help me
Yeah.
because we do it as a team.
Yeah, exactly. That introspection is so critical. So having that introspective kind of conversation with yourself, like you say, of kind of mapping out, what do you need to accomplish? Obviously that positive reaffirmation from yourself. So I heard, kind of an intrinsic, motivation of, reaffirming that you're on the right path and that you're doing the right things, and that if you can accomplish these activities, no matter how big or small, that you're moving and you're progressing. And even if you're moving an inch, you're still moving, right? And so you're progressing forward.
And since I never think I do enough in a day. So what I've added to that is what have I accomplished in that day?
Yeah.
You feel like, okay, concretely, like you said, Chan, I'm one step forward. I did do this for the bigger picture.
Yes.
So, even though I'm very motivated to move ahead and do things, I have to celebrate what was accomplished.
Yep. Absolutely.
Motivated.
Yep, no doubt about it. And so, Dr. Katrina, last thing, how can those that are listening get in touch with you? How can they connect with you if they love what they heard today and want to be able to connect with you? Obviously, go get the the resources that Dr. Katrina has laid out there at excellent executivecoaching.com. But aside from that, how can people connect with you?
Well, they can go to my website, excellentexecutivecoaching.com. There's a contact. They can contact me. There's a place to do so. They can go to my podcast where
Oh,
all coaching to help you move forward. And
what's the
that's
name of the podcast?
Excellent Executive Coaching.
Yeah, there you go. I'm subscribing. We love to support podcast here, Dr. Katrina. And
Yeah.
so excellent executive coaching. Let's go pull that up, MYB, go subscribe, leave a 5-star comment, positive comment there, and let Dr. Katrina know you heard her right here on the Minding Your Business podcast. But we love supporting other podcasters.
Yeah, you got to come on my podcast now, Chad.
Yes, I'm ready. Let's do it.
Okay, let's do it.
Yeah,
Great.
let's do it. I'm ready. So just whenever you are. But yeah, so that we can learn, obviously connect with you on your podcast. There's the contact form there at the website, excellentexecutivecoaching.com. And so MYB, reach out. This is a great way to network. That's a big part of this podcast, is to connect with people. Sometimes, you have to grow your wings a little bit and get out of your nest. For those of you that are in your city and you're trying to figure out how you can connect with other new resources that are engaged, well, Dr. Katrina is one. So reach out to her. And again, let her know you heard her right here on the Minding Your Business podcast, and then listen to some episodes of her podcast, and maybe a question will arise that you can share with her, or share with her your experiences in your organization with what you've dealt with or what you're dealing with now. She may have a great word for you that can make all the difference in your career. With the organization you're with now or another organization you may be with in the future. So,
yes, I'm passionate what I do, and in any way I can help, I'm delighted. So thank you, Champ. You're awesome. Love your podcast.
Yep, absolutely. And so we're going to do a part 2. So let's remain connected here, Dr. Katrina. I want to have you back here at some point in the near future, particularly as your next book comes out. Let's get you on so we can support that. And then we could talk about some of those subjects that we mentioned earlier. But Dr. Katrina Burrus joins us here today on episode number 212 of the Minding Your Business podcast. Dr. Katrina, I can't thank you enough. I've kept you a little longer than I intended to, but this has been a tremendous conversation. I definitely appreciate what you do. It's near and dear to my heart as someone that loves organizational development. and keep doing what you're doing. It definitely appreciate it. It makes a difference.
Thank you so much, Champ. You're awesome. Thank you very much.
Excellent. So, yep, yeah, no doubt about it. You're very welcome. And we'll do part 2 in MYB community, as you heard. So, and then I'd love to be able to go on Dr. Katrina Burrus's podcast as well, and share some value there as well. So hopefully you guys will be able to catch me there soon as well. So, but again, thank you all so much for listening. Listen, you can connect with me, champronbrooks.com, where you can see my adventures and learn more about me. You can listen to any episode of the podcast there, and you can communicate with me there as well. Listen, there are 3 things that unite us all, no matter where you're from, no matter what you look like in the mirror. Those 3 things are: we all want to be a little bit better for ourselves, a little bit better for our families, and a little bit better for our communities. I coined that phrase from my great business partner and friend, Scott Kinney. And so we all want to be a little better for ourselves, a little bit better for our families, a little bit better for our communities. And so if we keep that in mind with everybody that we interact with, and realize that we all want to get to that same goal, right? We may have different paths of getting there, but we all want that same goal to be just a little bit better. And if we do that, we can all be a little bit better together. So, Champ Ron, the Minding Your Business podcast, go be great.